Hello drummers, and welcome to my tutorial on reading and writing drum notation. My name is Damien, and hopefully you're going to get some use out of this. If you're the kind of drummer that's always wanted to read music but you didn't really know how and where you could get into it, or if you thought it might be too hard, or if it was going to take too long, fear not. It isn't, and it won't be. I've been teaching drums for quite some time now, and this particular PowerPoint presentation I'm going to show you really just covers the very basic entry level concepts of reading notation. So we're going to take it very slow. I'm going to use real life examples where we can to make the concepts easier to grasp. All right, so let's get straight into it. By the way, if you do like what you see, or if you do have any questions, feel free, of course, to message me. All right, so I guess the first question I always get asked is why am I doing this? Why am I learning to read drum music? And it's interesting, it actually reminds me of the student in class who would learn algebra for the first time and says, oh, why do we need to do this? And if you are, if you're accustomed to doing it, if you're used to it and you're competent in doing it, then you will use it. I, like many other drummers, started off not reading drum music. I was able to learn quite a lot by ear, and I almost felt that to read and write was actually going to slow me down. I was learning far quicker by ear, and why would I ever want to do this? So I just want to get this out of the way first and foremost, because it's always difficult to know how it's going to be useful before you can even see how it's going to be useful. So allow me to help you out there. Now for musicians, notation, not so much just drum notation, but indeed all music notation, is the means in which musicians communicate. It's the number one go-to method for writing down ideas, for recording ideas, for translating ideas between one musician and another. And I will point out that notation for guitar is different to what it is for drums, which is different to what it is on a flute, etc. But there are parallels, there are crossovers, and although you might learn to read the basics of drum notation and then pick up guitar music and it might look alien to you, there will still be things that will make sense. So you're not just learning notation for drums here, you're actually learning quite a bit about the broader concept of writing music. So it's a very, very powerful means of communication, and even at a basic level, you should be able to get some use out of what you're about to learn. Okay? Now, the other big thing, and this was a huge one for me once I started to read, is there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. There's exercise books, there are teaching manuals, there are song books, there are privately transcribed songs that people have, there's just so much stuff written out there for drums that you shouldn't have to be waiting for a music teacher to show you that next song that you want to learn, or scouting around on YouTube until someone finally puts up how to do this beat, or although it's getting easier and easier to do things that way as well, it's good to be able to pick up a book and learn from a book without having somebody have to show you first. So you can teach yourself. All right. Now, some of you may already be familiar with tab. Tab is it is a notation, but it's a keyboard adaptation. It really sort of gained popularity once the whole sharing of internet files and things became more popular, because, as you can appreciate, music costs money to make, and therefore most of the notation that you would download would come at a cost. And so people had started devising a way to write music using keyboard characters, and that's been sort of popularized now as tab. And although tab is very, very useful and does have quite a lot of parallels to drum notation, it isn't really drum notation. It's nowhere near as efficient, and it's quite ugly to read. And we'll see more of this as we go. All right. And the other thing is, it's easy to learn. It's really, really simple. If you can read and write words, then trust me, you're good enough to read and write drum music. All right. So now I'm going to go straight into the first concepts, and probably the most important concepts we're ever going to learn about writing drum notation, is we need to understand concepts of what a measure and what quarter notes are. They are the large building blocks of everything that we're going to sort of read and write from now on. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a real life example to help it make sense to you and obviously have some meaning. Okay. So here's what our goals. We should be able to understand, in fact, we should already understand how reading and writing of music is beneficial. We need to understand the concept of a measure. What is it? What's a measure all about? Okay, we're going to learn about what bar lines are, why they're used, where they're used, and how. And then we're going to look into our first type of note, which is a quarter note. We're going to look at what quarter note rests look like and how they compare to quarter notes, when and where they're used. We're going to be able to name the parts of the note and understand the ways that quarter notes can be written and how they will look on a piece of paper when you see it. So, moving right on, I'm going to give the example now of a parking garage business. Okay, so let's say that you own a parking garage, and in that garage, you've got 4 bays. And those bays are big enough to fit some semis, as you can see in the picture here. 4, in fact. Okay, you can fit 4 trucks in your garage, and that's your business. Now, it's not the only garage you have, but within those 4 bays, you've got some choices you can make. You can either fill every bay with a truck, as you see there, or if you're reserving one for a VIP or whatever the reason may be, you can choose to leave one of those bays empty. So bay number 2 is empty. Bay 1, 3, and 4 have trucks in them. Okay, obviously this is not too hard to grasp at this point. One thing I do want to point out, notice that that truck is taking up the entire bay. All right, there is no room left in bay 1, 3, and 4 at all. They are bumper to bumper. Remember this point because it's going to be important a little bit later on. Okay, now once we've allocated those 4 bays to either a truck or a couple of witches' hats, we need to close the garage, and as more trucks arrive, we need to open another garage. So you see there now, we've got the first garage full, a roller door comes down, and a second garage is now open with another 4 bays. If you want, this can actually go on indefinitely. So we fill the 4 bays, we shut the door, we open another garage. Fill the bays, shut the door, open another garage, etc., etc. All right, so this concept of a garage, this space that we've got the 4 bays in, this whole space here, we're going to call this a measure. All right, a measure is the space that you have to write your music. And you can fit a certain amount of music in a measure, the same as you can fit a certain number of trucks in a garage. But once you've filled that space, you have to close the measure and start another one. Okay, so if you get stuck, just keep thinking about the trucks and how they fit inside these 4 bays inside the garage, okay? A measure is also known as a bar, okay? So we're talking formal and informal language here. Both are correct, okay? You can call it a measure, you can call it a bar. So you probably hear people saying, okay, we're going to take it from bar 25, or I'm going to count in 4 measures and then we're going to start. So what they're talking about is the garages, the 4 bays, the space that you've got to write your music. Okay. Bar lines are the garage doors. They're our dividers. The bar lines will break up measure to measure. Okay, the same as the garage doors break up each garage into 4 bays. All right, and as we have with the garages, it tells us where one of them ends and the next one begins. Bar lines will tell you where a measure ends and where the next measure will begin. Okay, and just as a garage is filled with trucks or empty bays, measures get filled with notes or rests. The notes are the trucks, the rests are the witches' hats. All right? All right, so now we're going to look at our first type of note. So what does a quarter note look like? Well, of course, we're going to have 2 situations. We've either got a quarter note or we've got a quarter note rest. Remember, they take up the same amount of room in our garage or in our measure, but they do look slightly different. So let's look at them now. The quarter note, let's look on the left-hand side. So this would be a note that you would play. You'd hit it. You'd put it on some part of your kit. It would make a noise. Okay? And this note will consist of a note head, which is the rounded part that you see at the bottom here. I'm just going to bring the mouse over. So that's the note head. And a stem. Now that stem can go up or down, depending on what's easiest to read at the time. But if it's going to go up, then the stem needs to attach itself to the right-hand side of the note head. If the stem is going to point down, then it must attach itself to the left-hand side of the note head. That's very, very important because to write it the other way is incorrect. Okay, so that's our quarter note. Now, a quarter note rest, that's simply a note that we will count, but we're not going to play anything. That's a space. That's a silent, don't do anything note. That's the VIP witches' hats, reserve note. Now, I can't even explain to you what it looks like. It's kind of a sideways seagull with a broken wing, as I was taught back in school. But just be aware of the differences. All right, so these are two notes that we're going to need to identify on a piece of paper and be able to read now. Now, if you want to get technical about it, a quarter note is technically known as a crotchet. That's the formal term. I actually haven't heard it referred to that for a long, long time. Okay, it's a quarter note tends to make a lot of sense, especially for people that haven't been reading music long, because the whole concept of a quarter gives you some sort of idea about the amount of space that it takes up. Think of the truck inside the garage. So quarter tends to be a little bit more descriptive and helps people to understand what kind of note they're talking about, whereas a crotchet can be a little bit ambiguous when you first start to read. So we're going to still refer to them as quarter notes, okay? Remember that quarter notes and quarter note rests are counted the same way. Now, the question is, how do we count them? Well, it's actually very, very simple. We count them 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, this should already be familiar because everybody who's ever started a song or played with a band will probably count the band in by saying 1, 2, 3, 4 at the right speed for the song, and then bang, everybody comes in. What you're doing is you are counting off one measure of quarter notes to give the band the cue that the song's about to start. It's one measure of quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Measure is full. You're now into the next measure, which will happen to be the start of our song. All right, so it's a very technical way of explaining how and why we count songs in the way we do. Now, as I just explained there, we count them in one measure, and off we go. Now, let's have a look at how the trucks and the notes relate to one another. This should already be clear, but it's just a bit of a recap. So, as a garage has space for 4 trucks, a measure has space for 4 quarter notes. This should be really clear to you now, okay? Where the trucks are the same as the quarter notes, and the garage itself is what we're going to call a measure from now on, right? You can see there that the quarter notes themselves all have the stems going upwards, but as you can see in this example, and please forgive the counts in red because they are the formatting's gone a bit crazy, but you can see in the bottom example here, these quarter notes have been written with their stems down. Now, as I said before, that's fine, but you need to be aware of which way the stem needs to attach to the note head. If the stem is pointing down, then the stem has to attach to the left-hand side of the note head, as you can see here. If the stem's pointing up, it needs to attach to the right-hand side of the note head, as you see here. So ignoring those red numbers, the counts would actually be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Okay, so as the notes tell you down the bottom, regardless of whether the stems are pointing up or down, we've got hits on 1, 2, 3, and 4 in both of those measures. So those two examples will sound exactly the same. Okay, and again, just a note there about the way that the stems have to be attached to the note heads. Okay, now an example where we've had spaces in our parking garage, this is where the quarter note rests are going to come in. And the same rules will apply. Okay, so whether we've got the stems up or down, it's not going to matter provided they're attached to the right part of the note head. And the rests don't actually get tipped upside down. So that's even easier. They'll always look the same way. Okay, so in this example, if we were counting out 1, 2, 3, and 4, we would count 2, but we wouldn't play anything there. So we'd play a hit on 1, we'd leave 2 out, but we would count it in our head. We would play a hit on 3, and we would play a hit on 4. Okay, and in our garage example here, as we mentioned earlier, this whole concept can go on indefinitely. Garage gets full, door gets closed, and another garage opens with another 4 bays. Translated to musical speak, it tells us a measure gets filled, you put your bar line in, now you've got another measure. All right. I guess the bar lines can kind of be thought of as sentences when we're reading a newspaper or any words. It's like a full stop and a new sentence. It helps to break up the music into smaller bite-sized chunks so that it's easier to read and not so complicated. So going on indefinitely, here we go. So trucks and bays versus quarter notes and quarter note rests. So you should be able to see their measures. You can see bar lines. You can see quarter notes. You can see quarter note rests. You should know now that they'll be counted 1, 2, 3, 4. So where's all this leading? Well, if I show you another example here, this is quite a formal piece of snare drum music. And there may, of course, be a couple of characters on here that you're not yet familiar with, namely maybe these little guys here. But the rest of this, all of these notes here, up, down, rests, bar lines, this should all make a lot of sense to you now. Remember that you're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. Next measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All the way down to the end of the music. So if you've followed with me thus far and you're not confused, then congratulations, you have quite effectively learned the most important, I believe, most important concepts for reading and writing drum music. Now, yes, obviously it gets a lot more complicated than this, but not if you take each new piece after fully understanding the last piece. So I would recommend anyone that doesn't read any music, that can now read quarter notes, go through this example. Play it on your snare drum. Turn a metronome on, listen to those little clicks, count them 1, 2, 3, 4, and play along to this piece of music. Once you've mastered it, then I think you're ready to move on, and I'll get started on the next bunch of lessons. So thanks for watching, and if you do have any messages or questions, please either attach them in the posts or private message me. I am here at your disposal. Thank you and goodbye.